Welcome to another episode of Raven Conversations. I'm Joe C. Mandel, the State Public Affairs Officer for the Washington National Guard. And today I'm joined by Dr. Stephanie Carter. She is the Museum Curator for the Washington National Guard's Museum here on Camp Murray. She's here to talk about how you got interested in becoming a museum curator, kind of your own history with the Guard, and how you can also get involved with the Washington National Guard Museum. So thanks for joining us, Stephanie.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So just a little bit about me and where I come from. I am a Florida native. I've only been out here for about 3 years. As you said, I'm the curator, director, sometimes toilet cleaner. I do it all at the museum. Because when you've a small little collection of people, you kind of do what you have to do. I'm from a really small little town in Florida and moved out here, like I said, 3 years ago to take this job. So can't get as far away from Florida as I did. Just a little bit about like my professional background. So I've been in museums, it feels like my whole life. Probably in the scheme of things, at least 15 years. Museums, archives, libraries, all kinds of geeky stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I have a passion for lifelong learning and apparently for collecting degrees and student loans to go with that. So I have quite a few degrees, and so my first one was in anthropology, and then I also have a master's degree in museum studies, and then I have 2 degrees from Scotland because I have a passion for Scotland. One of which was my last one, which was my PhD that I did in Scotland. And it was also on a museum topic. So you could say I'm a little bit obsessed about the museum world and history. So
yeah. So you don't serve in the Guard, but you do have an interesting Guard story, and I'd love to hear it. Yeah,
definitely an outsider. I'm just a common person. I don't have any military experience myself, but I do have a connection to the Guard. My dad served in the Florida National Guard, and it was before I was born. And unfortunately, he passed away when I was 13. So as an adult with an interest, I never got to ask him about his service. And I do have a fun little story, though. I have an adopted family back in Florida that kind of, at a rough point in my life, kind of took me in and took care of me. It was during sort of a COVID time as well. And I call him my adopted dad. And I did know that he was also in Florida National Guard. And we come from a small little town in Florida, so not that many National Guard units mm-hmm. around. And we were all sitting, this again was COVID lockdown kind of situation. And we were all sitting around the dinner table one night, and adopted dad was telling the story about a fellow guardsman that he served with, and said, I think this was probably late 70s. And he was serving with this gentleman who had a really unfortunate incident in a latrine. But Florida, lots of creepy crawlies, he got bit in an unfortunate place by a black widow spider. And I piped up and said, oh my gosh, that was my dad, my real dad. And he hadn't made the connection that he had served with my dad and the last name. He was like, I never even thought about the last name and it being your dad. And so they actually, my 2 dads served together. And so it definitely made me feel closer to my real dad by learning about my adopted dad's service. And unfortunately, he just actually passed away this past weekend. And so it's super emotional to kind of have this conversation, but it's also important because I am very proud of both my dads and their service in Florida. So I thought that would be a fun little story. But in addition, to add just a little bit more fun, my dad had to go to the hospital, unfortunately, because of this, and had some friends come visit him in the hospital. And one of those was a nice lady. Well, the nice lady turned out to be my mom, and that's how they met. Is through the Guard. Wow. So there you go. I'm supposed to be here, right? It's a full circle.
Yeah. Not the Florida Guard, the Washington Guard.
There you go. Yeah. A whole different place, but still the Guard.
So what is it about history that made you want to become a museum curator?
Well, I will say my first interest, and these things kind of evolve over time as you experience different things. And my first interest was, as a child, I loved watching, National Geographic programs or the History Channel and learning about other cultures, especially ones that were starkly different to my own existence and how I lived, and learning about how people in the world live. And once I realized that there was a phrase for that, anthropology, the study of humans, that kind of thing, when I went to school, I knew absolutely that's what I wanted to study. Never changed my major, did that. And that really, in the scheme of my work over the years, that's always been the base. That's the study of humans, and where it has kind of evolved over the years. I've gotten degrees in various things, but they've all been related in some way. I think museums are the place that we showcase, human history. We demonstrate, we show objects that people have created. We show things that we've used as humans. We show things that we appreciate as beautiful, as art, as that kind of thing. It's a place where we can be just as human as possible, because it's showcasing what it is to be human.
Mm-hmm.
And through my museum studies program I did at Johns Hopkins, I discovered my absolute true love, still with the mindset of the human nature in mind. And it's called material culture. And it's the study of things and how we as humans interact with these things. And I think it's just absolutely fascinating that, depending on our own histories and our own background and our own situations, one object that we both see is completely different in meaning. So, like, for instance, if it's something in our museum that has a military association, probably does, that might mean something completely different to you than it does to me, because I don't have a background being in the military. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a fascinating thing, because at the end of the day, it's just a thing.
Yeah.
But it's our experiences that add value to that thing for us. And my entire PhD looked at one set of a collection in Scotland. And I told the story of this collection through the face of value, how it's valued, and nothing to do with monetary. So it's nothing to do with how much it's worth, but what all the other elements people value that particular object. And, I have a passion, in addition for the objects, I have a passion for then taking care of them. So through my studies, I did a lot of work with collections care, collections management. For a little bit of time, I was studying to be a museum conservator. And you probably have heard of that as the person with like the cotton swab cleaning the piece of art. I learned really quickly that's a lot of responsibility. I don't want to mess up a priceless painting because I don't know what I'm doing. But I did study for a while in the proper management. So that's kind of my specialty, is collections, their care, and then telling their story. So again, that's kind of evolved through my studies, through time. So it's kind of where I've ended up. And I feel like, that can be applied to all kind of museums. And it's definitely, our museum, we have so many stories to tell through not only objects, but people's experiences with those objects as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about our museum, the Arsenal. What is it about the museum that is so fascinating in your mind?
So for me, so I'm the new kid on the block around here. I've only July, which I'm not sure when this will be out, but July of this year of 2024, I'll have only been here 3 years. So I'm relatively new in the timeline of this museum. It's been going on for 30 years. And it was started 30 years ago by a group of people who just had a passion for making sure we're preserving history. Volunteers, they just put their blood, sweat, and tears, efforts, all the things into making sure people we're not forgetting our past. And to me, when I first moved out here and saw how many items we actually have, I was floored. As a museum professional, I'm like, you guys have a Gatling gun? How have you managed to get some of these items as volunteers through the years? So I definitely want to make sure we never forget where we started and what the efforts of people before me were to get us to where we are today. And I think, we certainly want to keep that in mind. And saying that, I am the, first professional that was ever hired to come in and kind of move us forward into the future. And our current tag, he was a history teacher by trade before he was a full-time guardsman. So he absolutely understands the importance of history and wants to make sure our museum reflects that. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I come in to help move us forward. And our museum, I want it to become maybe where it wasn't in the past, but maybe in the future to become the heart of the Washington National Guard, a place where everybody can come together. Doesn't matter if you're Army or Air Force or where you're from, we can all come together with our families and experience what is the Washington National Guard in one place together. I want it to be a place of pride for everyone as well that, reflects our stories, not only our past, but where our future is going as well. And then in addition to me, we're kind of a rarity in the United States in terms of National Guard museums. A lot of people don't realize this, but we're maybe a handful of Guard museums that have both myself and we also have a command historian in place. And the fact that leadership finds it important enough to have both of us here is pretty telling that, we're trying our best to preserve our history and tell that story. And Dr. Parent, he's been an absolute vital part of my job because he's also a colonel in the Guard, and he helps me when I'm, excuse the phrase, but military stupid. He helps me a lot to be able to understand things. And I'm really grateful to have him as my colleague to help us tell this story together.
Yeah. So visitors come, you guys are now open, I think, every day of the week minus Monday, because most people we're closed on Monday for the most part. What can they expect when they walk in the doors of the museum?
Well, so at the moment, as we're recording this, we're not open. We've been under construction for quite a few months. And this is, again, showing the importance of the work that we're doing here. Our building, which is 1916, oldest building on Camp Murray. Also, trivia for anybody who needs to know, we were here before JBLM. Sorry, folks, but we were. The building has never had AC in its whole existence. And AC is a really important AC, HVAC, that kind of thing. Environmental controls are super important in taking care of our collection. So because of this, we definitely feel very fortunate to be able to finally get that implemented into the museum. However, it's meant we've had to be closed for a very long time. But Jim and I, Colonel Perrin, Dr. Perrin, will be working on resetting the exhibits, kind of reworking them a little bit to make them a little bit more relevant, kind of updating some things. So hopefully, people will want to come back in and visit. So we aren't currently open on the weekends, but that's something we'd like to change. Saying that we'd like to be open at least maybe one day on drill weekend to make it more accessible for soldiers, airmen, and their families who be around in that time. So that's something to look forward to the future. Right now, it's a bit of a mess, but we'll get that cleared out. And what you see when you visit is we're trying our best to tell the story of the Guard and saying that we have work to do. We have stories we need to tell. There are a lot of stories that are out there, and we need to tell them. They're not hidden per se, but maybe just ones that we haven't addressed yet. So that's something that we'll be working on. But we do try to tell the story of the Guard through time, through our beginnings to kind of where we are now. So that's kind of what we'll see. And it's all manner of things. It's objects, it's pictures, it's all kinds of wonderful things like that.
Yeah. So kind of just one of those random questions that comes up when I'm thinking about them is there any item in the museum that you believe is just so unique to the Washington National Guard?
Well, I did mention the Gatling gun because those are pretty rare. And we've always heard this rumor that it was found on Camp Murray behind a wall. And we're historians and museum professionals and all that. So we understand great sort of tall tales and that thing, but we do research. We both have PhDs. We're trying to find, is this really what happened? And the irony is that a gentleman who actually found the Gatling gun came in at some point a few months ago and said, I did find it behind a wall.
Wow.
Which is crazy that we had just a very unique item that had gotten stored away somewhere. And, our historian, he's fantastic. And he did a little research and found out, because we didn't actually know if the Washington National Guard ever used a Gatling gun. And he actually did some research and looked at some photographic evidence, and we definitely did at one point. So it's an amazing item that we have that volunteers managed to get for us too. So
that's a unique item, but what's your favorite item in the museum to this point? Well, now that you've been there for 3 years.
Yeah, so we definitely have a lot of amazing things. I think my favorite is just a kind of a fun, whimsical thing. We have a dog gas mask. And it's the cutest thing because it's on a display right now with a little dog head form, and you can just see his little ears sticking up. But it just goes to show, working animals, they had to be protected in wartime as well. But I just think I'm a lover of animals. So it just kind of is a fun, fanciful, kind of amazing item that's my favorite currently. It could change, but currently.
Yeah. So you mentioned tall tales, and we talked about it I think a couple Halloweens ago, the museum potentially has always been haunted from what the tales say. It's a former guardsman that kind of walks the museum at night.
Well, it's interesting. It was my second day of work. Hadn't been in the state very long. Second day on the job, and I had someone say, "Your museum is haunted." And I was like, "Great. What a great way to start my new job." We definitely, it's an old building. It's got a lot of history associated with it. I don't think anything nefarious happened there. But there are some strange sounds both Dr. Perrin and I have heard. I've definitely heard footsteps with nobody around. We have a toilet that decides to flush on its own. Sometimes it's in the men's room. Sometimes it's in the ladies' room. It could just be bad plumbing in an old building. Old buildings make creaky sounds and things, but wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, he's probably just there to protect the archives at night. And
there we go. We had a little conversation. I was like, "Look, I'm just here to do good work. Please let's just be nice to each other."
Yeah. So for those interested that want to get involved with the museum, how can they get involved?
So really the best thing that we can ask of people at this moment is donation of items, photographs, things like that related to their service. All of these items, as you know, I mentioned, I definitely have a love of things, but because I believe things can help us tell our story. And associated with these things is also that person's story. And every person's story is important, and every person's story helps make up the bigger picture of what the Washington National Guard is. So for me, that kind of involvement is super important. So please keep us in mind if you're retiring, have retired, and you have items in your house and you're like, please don't throw them away. Let us know. We'll be your hoarders for you. So just let us know. But also, eventually we're working on reformatting our volunteer program, getting that in place, getting some ideas of jobs and things that people could help us with. And so eventually we'll have that back in place where people can be actually involved in the museum in that way as well.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm really grateful for the time I get to learn about the Guard. And, again, going full circle, making my connection with my family, obviously different state. But yeah, I'm real appreciative of the people that have helped us along the way and continue to want to do best and help us tell the story as well.
No, we appreciate you and your expertise and what you brought to the museum to this point, and continue to look forward to as you guys kind of bring it into the 21st century and move us forward. If you're interested in learning more about the museum, we can definitely put Dr. Carter's information in the notes, along with a link to the website for the museum. She could probably provide you with a ton of information about how to donate items, how to get involved in that kind of thing. If you like the video, give it a like. If you want to know more, subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, throw them in the comments below and we'll pass them along. And thanks for joining us, Steph. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.